Are you worthy? That's the question Den of Nalorakk demands an answer to out the gate. Are we worthy to do battle with the Loa of War himself? To be found worthy and come out the victor in this dungeon, we must demonstrate that we can navigate through the intense trash packs in our way and defeat the precisely cadenced boss fights within the Bear Loa's Dream Trials. It's Jason here. I have spent hour upon hour and reviewed combat log after combat log over the last few weeks in Den of Nalorakk as Mistweaver in PUGs throughout the PTR cycle. Give me 25 minutes of your time, and I will share with you what I've learned. Every boss, the trash that kills your keys, and nothing I can't back up. Let's talk first, though, about what you should bring with you. In Den of Nalorakk, there are a few things to have in your toolkit. Bring your soothe abilities. Your tank's survivability may depend upon it here. Bring your dispels. Magic you'll have, and while poison isn't quite as prevalent in here as it is in other dungeons, you'd be glad you brought it for the first boss. First dispels have a niche application as well, though they're not mandatory. Lastly, Den doesn't heavily rely on stuns and disrupts, but they are a staple for any Mythic Plus run. Now before we jump in, let's talk about how we're going to stack these encounters up in here. Same as always, we're going to rank every boss and trash pack on how hard it is on you as the healer to heal. And here is my scale. S tier is brutal. You're needing to plan cooldowns and mistakes cascade. A tier is steady, with real burst moments that you heal into. With B tier, you're keeping your heals rolling and you're fine. And C tier is barely a heal check at all. It's mostly mechanics. Dispels, stuns, and dodges. Don't waste a cooldown there. Tier will pop up in the corners we go, full board at the end. And it's my read, on PTR before final tuning. Now one thing that'll show up when we get to the end is that none of these bosses are S tier difficulty, but the trash mobs more than make up for that. And we're going to hit them in that order. Bosses first, then the trash. So let's dive in. The first boss in our Bear Loa's Dream is Hoardmonger, who moves to the rhythm that you set. The choices you make in here will decide how difficult he becomes. He has three main abilities: Ravenous Bellow, which is a group-wide physical damage hit; Earthshatter Slam, which is a frontal cone that you avoid; and Spoiled Supplies, where he throws rotten food out that create rotten mushrooms. Step on these to clear them before they cause group-wide damage. Now you will eat a stacking poison dot for it, but that's the trade. Personals are valuable here. Now Hoardmonger is stationed within a circular arena with 3 piles of supplies. These contain bone, meat, and mushrooms. And Hoardmonger runs on a strict 40-second cycle. Bellow, Slam, and Supplies, with each beginning at 6, 18, and 30 seconds into each cycle. Now the premise of the fight is that the boss at 90%, 70%, and 40% health gains a buff that enhances an existing ability, or it swaps it out for a stronger version. Now at each health threshold, the boss will run to the closest remaining resource pile that he hasn't been to yet, and he's going to gain a buff. Which ability gets upgraded with that buff is based on the pile that he ran to. Meat will upgrade Bellow, Bone will upgrade Slam, and Mushrooms will upgrade Supplies. Now because he runs to the closest pile, your tank has full control over the order of the upgrades. The goal here is to upgrade the least impactful abilities first. The most favorable order for your group here is Bones, followed by Meat, and then Mushrooms. Let's talk about the upgrades. Bones replaces Earthshatter Slam with Bone Spike Slam, causing his slam to create spikes that persist in that cone for 45 seconds. These are avoidable, but they do inflict damage and they tack on a slow if you touch them. Meat is going to replace Ravenous Bellow with Hearty Bellow, adding a large knockback effect. Watch your feet, this can knock you out of the arena. And lastly, Mushrooms are going to upgrade Spoiled Supplies to double the mushroom count from 6 to 12. increasing your number of dot applications as well. Now, because the upgraded slam is avoidable, it is our first priority upgrade. Bellow comes in next because while it does a huge knockback, you can position for that, and that knockback is not going to scale as the key level rises. That leaves the upgraded mushrooms, which are impactful to your group, so save these to 40%. Now for me, Hoardmonger is a very enjoyable fight. He has some bursty moments to heal through, but it is not an end-to-end healing burn. As such, we're going to come in at A tier for this guy. Now, this next boss though will have you sliding in circles while you're trying to melt him down. Now at the end of our wintry section of the dream, you're going to find an icy orb on a frozen pool of water. After skating over to it, the group will channel an orb to summon the Sentinel of Winter, our second boss. Now, two important interactions to cover here. First off, the icy surface interacts as if you were skating on actual ice. The physics are pretty neat here for a boss fight. It may take a bit of reaction time to start moving though because you're sliding, and stopping will take a bit too, so you have to adjust your movement mindset here. Also, the snowy banks along the edge of the water are out of bounds. If you step into the snow, you're going to take intense rot from Blizzard's wrath. Now, I haven't tested all of the snowy patches here, so if there is a gap, I'm sure we'll find it as the season progresses. Now, for the actual Sentinel's mechanics, this guy has a strict 63-second ability loop with 4 big abilities, and there's a couple of resulting mechanics that fall out of those. So at 7 seconds into the cycle, Sentinel will target 3 players and put a 16-second magic debuff on each of them. You have to priority dispel this. At 13 seconds, he will spawn 5 icy tornadoes at player locations. Now these are going to persist for 90 seconds, and they move around the arena, but they seem to have a fixed movement cadence. As such, the strategy here seems to be stack on the tank prior to the cast completing, so that all tornadoes stack tightly together, reducing the impact on the arena. Now, I will put one note on this though. There was a similar mechanic in Blinding Veil earlier in the PTR that got adjusted during testing, preventing this type of strategy. So we'll see if it makes it to live. Now at 26 seconds, Sentinel is going to cast Shattering Frostbite, which marks 2 spots with circles. Don't stand in these first 2 circles. After a second, an ad is going to spawn from them. You have to stop the cast from these ads and damage them down as soon as possible. You have about 15 seconds to damage at least one of them down before the next critical ability comes around. Now, one note there, as each ad dies, they're going to throw out a circle on the ground, and this time you have to soak this one. So soak it, or you're going to eat group-wide damage plus a root effect at exactly the wrong time. Finally, to complete our cycle here at 51 seconds, Sentinel is going to channel a massive storm called Frozen Tempest. Now, prior to this channel, your tank should position the boss next to where one of the ads died, as they leave behind a snowdrift, which slows you, but it also prevents forced movement effects. And what that means is that you can stand in the eye of the storm in the snowdrift and not get pushed around. And that means you're also not going to get pushed out of the eye of the storm. Now, notably, snowdrift doesn't reduce damage taken from Tempest. You're still going to take ticking damage from that storm. But if you get pushed out of the eye, you're going to take extreme rot damage that's not survivable for very long. Now, a few seconds later, the cycle is going to start all over again. And your response is the same. Dispels, stack, kill the ads, soak the circles, get in a snowdrift, rinse, repeat. And this A-tier boss is going to melt at your feet. Now, once we're done here, build the fire, and you're going to head to your final challenge in the arena with the Bear Loa himself. Now, I do think it's sort of appropriate to talk about Loa speaker Nanea before we get to Nalorakk, because we have to defeat her as our last trial before we can face him. Now, she has 3 abilities to focus on, the first being a filler interruptible and lightning bolt that you simply need to interrupt as you can. Next, she's going to target 2 players, and after a 4-second cast, she's going to drop an earthquake on them. So drop these away from your party. Finally, she's going to drop 3 volatile totems around the room. Similar to other totems that we've seen in this dungeon pool, these have to be prioed down. Some of these are going to spawn in the earthquake zones, so your ranged and potentially your tank are going to have to deal with these. After that, rinse repeat, you're going to defeat her, and then you're going to join Zul'jara in combat with Nalorakk himself. Nanea is an A-tier fight as long as the totems are focused down. And at this point, you have proven yourself worthy to face Nalorakk himself. Nalorakk is a heavily scripted fight, and it has 2 sub-cycle rotations inside of a larger rotation. So let's talk about it. 5 seconds in, Nalorakk will target 3 players with Echoing Maul. This, after a 4-second cast, will drop an echo image of himself at that player's location, and it's going to do a burst of damage to them. So drop these tightly spaced together in a single area of the room. Now most groups are dropping these in the back left corner and along the walls. And we'll talk about here shortly why you need to drop those in specific spots. At 13 seconds in, he targets the tank with Overwhelming Onslaught, and Zul'jara will jump to the tank to shield the party with Defensive Stance. Now your group must stack behind the shield, similar to the Scovald encounter in Halls of Valor back in the day. At the end of his ramp for Onslaught, he's going to hit your group with 3 big group hits, and he's going to knock us back. Now immediately after that knockback, Nalorakk is going to target an area of ground in front of himself for Forceful Slam, which shows up as a circle right in front of him. And because we just stacked up, everybody's gut reaction is stack again. But don't do this, or you're going to get one shot. This circle is a tank only soak, though it could be soaked with immunity such as Divine Shield or such as well. But regardless, one player and only one, most of the time being the tank, should soak this. Now after this, Nalorakk is going to repeat those same 3 abilities of Echoes, Stack for the Shield, Getting Knocked Back, and the Tank Soak. Now at the end of those 2 repeated cycles, and at 55 seconds into the overall cycle, Nalorakk is going to knock Zul'jara back, stunning her. He then is going to direct his Echoes to charge at her during Fury of the War God. Stand in the gap between the Echoes and Zul'jara to prevent her from getting hit. Now at the end of that sequence, the larger cycle is going to start over again. And every 65 seconds, you're going to repeat these steps. Drop your Echoes, stand in the shield, let the tank soak the circle, drop your Echoes again, stand in the shield, let your tank soak the circle, and then intercept the Echoes. On repeat. And that's the fight. It's A-tier all the way, but it's a fun encounter and it requires precise movement planning. And from the healer's seat, your goal is to top up your group after each of the hits, and then simply DPS the boss between. This is the first fight in this dungeon, as well as one of the few in the dungeon pool that doesn't have a rot mechanic. Enjoy the reprieve. So let's talk about how you access each of these bosses, and what stands in your way. Now Den is a linear dungeon, with the only routing decisions being which trash packs you're going to need to take out along the way. Section 1 will refer to all trash and interactions up to the first boss. And after that, all trash up to Sentinel will be considered Section 2, even though they share the same map. Now there is a little bit of overlap in mob types between Section 1 and the first part of Section 2, and we'll talk about that. Section 3 is going to have its own map with its own trash and boss. Now, as with Altar of Fangs and other dungeons this expansion, the first boss, the Hoardmonger, is gated behind interactable objects. In this case, offerings that you need to use to activate the boss. Now, these offering locations are marked on the in-game map, and I've included them here as well. but notably, you only have to access 6 of the 8 offerings provided. However, standing in your way is some very nasty trash, some of which you want to avoid at all costs. And we'll start with possibly the worst trash mob in the whole dungeon pool. The worst 6 mobs in this dungeon are the Spirits of Hunger, spread around section 1, and you want to avoid them at all costs. Now, during PTR, a 1 spirit route and a 2 spirit route were possible, and I hope that 1 spirit route makes it to live. A no spirit route may be possible, but it's very unlikely. 2 concerns here with the spirits. First and most importantly, they drop a totem-like object called the Starvation Effigy. This is the single most important object in the dungeon, and it must be hard swapped to for nuking it down immediately. It has an uninterruptible cast of Insatiable Hunger, and it places a 25-second curse on the entire party, and that curse reduces their health by 15% per stack. Now, I've seen this hit 6 stacks, and that means that 90% of a player's health pool is gone that your healer can't heal back. Now, at this count, most mechanics easily one-shot you. The effigy itself can be cleaved down with AoE, but it should be single target focused down. Now, a note here, the debuff itself doesn't drop when combat is complete, so if you have a curse dispel, you should probably dispel your tank before they jump into another pack. On the pull itself, dispels can be helpful, but they really aren't the solution because the debuff comes too quickly for a single dispel to have a huge impact. 1 or 2 of the stacks of this curse can be managed, but beyond that, we're walking it back. His second ability is a channeled health drain, and that heals him. It's unavoidable, you just have to nuke him down as soon as possible. Now, priority here is always effigy first, then the spirit, and then everything else that you have pulled with them. I have marked the spirit locations here on your map. Number 1 and number 4 are patrolling their respective roads. All the others are stationary. This mob by himself is S tier by far. And honestly, he's my most hated mob in all of Season 2. Simply because there is nothing I can impactfully do about watching my players' health pools drop and I can't heal it back. Now, the B tier Thornclaw Gatherer simply drops disease patches on the ground to move out of. Just move your feet and keep your party topped. They do have a stacking armor reduction that goes on your tank though, so keep an eye on that. Now, I will say, even though they're a B tier mob, in some of my runs on the PTR, those disease patches added up to one of the most damaging abilities in the dungeon. The Keen-Eyed Striker takes the lead in that with their Razor Dive ability. They're an A tier mob and they have that single ability of that Razor Dive charge that leaves a bleed on their target. And while that's simple, during PTR, as I said, this was the most damaging ability in the dungeon overall. Dwarf Racials and Bop can both be helpful here, but ultimately you probably just have to heal through it. Our next mob, the Tender, simply needs to be interrupted. He does an AoE heal called Healing Breeze. You need to keep this from going off. That's it. Just stun, interrupt, disrupt this C tier mob and move on. Now lastly, here in section 1, our second most important mob in here is the Territorial Matriarch. And we're going to see her again in section 2 later as well. Now she's a B tier mob to heal until her cubs die. And then she gains a stacking enrage per cub death. Now a single enraged Matriarch is probably survivable by your tank. If they pull 2 to 3, your tank may be running for their life. But this is where the soothe abilities that we talked about at the top come in to remove that enraged from the Matriarch. However, it's important that you probably hold your soothe for a couple of seconds until all of the cubs are down, and that will ensure that she won't enrage again. Now the Matriarch is S tier without soothes, or not enough soothes. A tier if you have a soothe or 2 for managing the 2 to 3 Matriarch pulls. And that rounds out Section 1, and it allows us to progress into Section 2 after the Hoardmonger. Now, after we get into Section 2, we will see all of these mobs again at the very start of that section, except, thankfully, for the spirits. They're confined to Section 1. When we reach the Icy Tundra, though, at that point, we're going to run into some new trash mobs to enjoy. The Mauler does a single ability to watch out for in Frigid Roar. This is an interruptible haste down and snare effect. Remove the snare to remove the dot, or in this case the debuff, but it's probably just more simple to interrupt or stun the cast. This guy is a C tier mechanic mob. The Glacial Revenant does a Cryo Surge magic splash rot that must be dispelled from affected players. This effect damages all players within the 4-yard circle, so move out until you're dispelled or until it expires. Then the Revenant will cast Snowdrift, which will slow all players in the zone, and this lasts for 20 seconds. Now, by themselves, if managed correctly, these mobs are C tier mobs. Now, when you put them together with others that we're going to talk about next, this can be hugely impactful. Avatar has a couple of abilities to watch out for. He does a group root ability that can be removed with snare removals. However, he also casts a 12-yard damage and stun effect in Pulverize. So if you're rooted in that stun area and you can't get out of this combination, that can be hugely impactful. By itself, these abilities make this guy a B tier mob to heal through and move out of. But let's talk about the final combined pull before Sentinel, that if you pulled these guys together, it's going to be interesting. Now, groups are going to commonly pull this pack of Avatar, Revenant, and a new mob called the Terra Rumbler onto the winner Squall. The Squall itself does a small rot effect, and more importantly causes a line of sight issue. If players are on opposite sides of the Squall, or inside and outside of the Squall, you can't heal across those boundaries. Put that together. Look at the stacks of the slows from the Revenant, the snare effect from the Avatar, the potential stun effect from the Avatar because of the snare of the slow, a splashing damage pulse from the Rumbler, and line of sight issues. And you've got a massive amount of things to deal with. This pull itself, if done together, is S tier. Now in Section 3 after Sentinel, we start back at the campfire from before the dream. Now as you advance into this new area, you're going to run into a pack of 3 mobs. And that first pack there was typically skipped in the PTR by walking along the right wall. We'll see if that survives to live. And we will talk about these mob types though in the next pulls. The Warbringer is our hardest remaining mob. He has 2 major abilities. Primal Echo is a large group-wide hit that adds a physical dot on the backside of it. This ability hurts a lot. And he pairs that with Poison Spear Volley to target the ground with poison circles. So move your feet and don't be there when the poison lands. Now the first Warbringer you pull will likely be pulled into the next pack of double Totemcallers and a couple of D tier funnel mobs. Those D tier funnel mobs are the Saberfang, which does a fixate and simply needs to be kited and killed, and a Beast Tamer, which can be soothed to reduce damage. However, he just does a shoot ability, and he's barely noticed on current tuning. The Totemcallers, though, drop magma totems that, like any other totem in this dungeon pool, must be hard swapped to and nuked down. As normal with totems, AoE does not touch these. Overall, this pack pulled together is S tier. If you pulled the Warbringer by himself, probably an A tier killing pull. Now, after the single Warbringer and Totemcallers, you're going to have a recovery pull or two where the only major thing is totems to deal with. And then you have the penultimate trash pull in the dungeon. This is double Warbringers with a Mystic. Now the Mystic is a D tier mob to interrupt as you can and primarily just burn him down. But the double Primal Echoes from the Warbringer and their avoidable poison circles make this another S tier pull. And that wraps up Den. So let's talk about where this all landed. It's S tier for the spirits, the matriarchs, the winter Squall, and both Warbringer pulls. It's A tier for all three bosses, Nanea, and the keen-eyed strikers. B tier for the Thornclaws, and finally C tier for the Tenders, Maulers, and Revenants. Any remaining mobs that I've experienced in here are D tier funnel, that we really don't need to have too much of a conversation about. So look at that board. What we see from this is that the trials themselves are fair, manageable encounters. The trash mobs in the packs, maybe not so much. But that's it. Den of Nalorakk from the healer's seat. And this place is a blast. The overall theme is hugely engaging. Just this concept of being inside the Bear Loa's dream has a feel to it that just makes this dungeon enjoyable, even through the crazy trash packs. More dungeons coming. Subscribe if you want the rest as they drop. We're doing all 8. And leave a comment telling me which dungeon you'd like to see next. Above all, have fun in the new season. Be kind to one another. We're all learning new content again. Happy gaming and good luck.